Yeah, you know the big names. Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Franklin. History class paints them like god-tier figures that sat around in their powdered wigs just thinking up the greatest country they could. Their faces are on our money and their names are on our cities. They're the legends that we're supposed to look up to. But what if I told you that that calm, philosophical vibe was pretty much bullshit? What if the key to winning independence wasn't the war hero, the thinker, the idealist, or the diplomat, but a man so stubborn and hard-headed that he would start a fight in an empty room? This is a story of a guy who was running the show in 2 different states at the same time. A man who nearly threw hands in a congressional session and was challenged to a duel because of it. And a guy whose raw, uncut willpower dragged a colony kicking and screaming to the vote for independence. This is the story of Thomas McKean, America's most stubborn and perhaps most essential founding father. And if you're saying, wait, I've never heard of this guy, there's a pretty damn good reason why. The guy was a walking, talking pain in the ass. He made enemies faster than he could make allies, and most of his allies were more afraid of him than his enemies. In the end, he had pissed off almost everyone he worked with, and that is the same reason that history ghosted him. Thomas McKean was born in Pennsylvania in 1734 to Scotch-Irish immigrants, which is basically code for we don't want to be told what to do. From the jump, it became clear that McKean wasn't going to live a quiet life. He was incredibly smart and equally ambitious. He studied law in Delaware, then passed the bar by age 21 and immediately jumped into the political Shark Tank. In his early 20s, he became Deputy Attorney General, and by 28, he had been elected to the Delaware Assembly. He was a member of the Country Party early on, which made it no surprise which side of the revolution he came down on. The Country Party's tagline might as well have been "No taxation without representation." These guys might as well have been the backbone of what would later become the revolution. And McKean was not a slow and steady wins the race kind of guy. He shot up the ranks, powered by brains and an arrogance that had not rubbed just everyone the wrong way. Yet. But when shit started kicking off with Great Britain, McKean's true character, that legendary stubbornness, came to play. He wasn't just part of the resistance, he was the engine. And if someone was on the tracks, he'd just run them over. Alright, so McKean's reputation for being a giant pain in the ass gets its first seal of approval at the Stamp Act Congress in 1765. This is when 27 men from 9 different colonies came together in New York City to figure out a polite way to tell Parliament to take the stamps and shove them. The guy that is president of the Stamp Act Congress is a representative from Massachusetts by the name of Timothy Ruggles. He initially is with everyone in writing these letters to the Parliament and to the King asking for the Stamp Act to be repealed. But when it comes time to actually sign the papers, he backs off and has the guts to say it was his conscience. McKean sees this as an act of cowardice and a move that will make the colonists look like a bunch of chumps. And McKean doesn't just disagree, he goes absolutely nuclear, screaming at Ruggles in front of God and everyone the word conscience. Things get heated, and when 2 men disagree in the 18th century, we settle it with a duel. He challenges them, and then McKean basically looks at him and says, "Name your time and place, asshole." So they do. They name the time, they name the place, and the next morning, old Timmy gets up a little bit earlier than everyone else and skips right on out of town before the duel can take place. It's no wonder that dude became a loyalist. This tells everyone what they need to know, though. McKean isn't here to make friends, and he's not here to find a middle ground. And it leaves supporters that would later go on to be revolutionaries with the idea that on one hand he's kind of a dick, but on the other hand he gets shit done. But McKean's legendary aggressiveness is going to pay off huge in the summer of '76. The Second Continental Congress is meeting and they're chewing over this idea: independence. They all agree that the vote needs to be unanimous, that every colony must be on board. Either we all go for independence or no one does. The problem is Delaware. Their vote's deadlocked. McKean is rah-rah independence. George Reed, on the other hand, is a little more skeptical. I give George Reed a lot of grief, but honestly, would you be that excited to possibly sign your own death warrant? Now, the big issue is they vote on July 1st. It's tied. They're going to vote again on July 2nd. And the only guy that can break the tie for Delaware is Caesar Rodney, who's 80 miles away in Dover, Delaware. Top that off with Rodney is sick. He has asthma and facial cancer. But without him, Delaware's vote is a stalemate and essentially a no, threatening to tank the revolution before it ever gets started. Any other man might have thrown in the towel, but McKean is hell-bent on making sure that Delaware is not the reason that independence doesn't go through. So he sends Rodney a letter by courier that's basically a get your ass to Philly now. Never heard that story? Go check out my video on Caesar Rodney. After you finish this, of course. He broke the tie and Delaware voted yes, but only because McKean was too damn stubborn to take no for an answer. Now, John Adams was a bit of a fan of McKean. He described him as being the kind of guy who could look at a situation, immediately pick out the problems that would affect the end result, and then immediately be able to tell you, let's do this or that in order to solve those problems. Stories like this about guys who did the dirty work but then got left off the highlight reel let you know what happened behind the scenes. And if you think their stories deserve to be told, I'd like you to take a minute and hit that subscribe button so that way I can keep bringing you stories like this. McKean's stubbornness wasn't reserved just for winning fights. It was designed for building a country too. So in the fall of 1776, right after everything is wrapped up with the Declaration, Delaware is in need of a state constitution. McKean gets word, and what does he do? Of course, heads immediately for Dover. Upon arriving, he is informed that no one has even started writing it yet. So they ask him to put together a draft. So what does he do? Checks into the nearest inn, breaks out a pen, breaks out some paper, and gets to work. He writes the entire thing in one night. Think about that. No committees, no weeks of arguing over bullshit. He just sits down, focuses in, and absolutely puts in work. So the next day is September 20th, 1776, and you'd think they might go over this for a few days and actually use it as a draft, but no, they decide that what McKean's written is so damn good, we're just going to put it to a vote now. They end up adopting it unanimously. Shortly after this, he's serving as both a delegate in the Delaware Assembly and as the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, when he gets notice that he needs to go to Delaware because the governor's been captured. Well, when he gets there, everyone else has said no to taking over as the new governor. He ends up finding the state basically in shambles. The British have taken every bit of money. There's almost no army left. Basically, Delaware is just an entity in name. While he's there, he does what he can, but on the other hand, he's also pushing very hard to get a new election so that way he can go back to Pennsylvania and someone else can take over. Eventually, this happens and George Reed becomes the president of Delaware. It's not just unusual, it's insane to think that McKean is not only a member of the Delaware Assembly, he's governor of that state, but he's also Chief Justice of the Supreme Court all at the same time. Unfortunately, the relentless drive that had pushed him into those roles was about to make him a lot of enemies. After the war, McKean's career is solely Pennsylvania. He sits on the Supreme Court as Chief Justice for 22 years before stepping down when he's elected governor. Well, that my way or the highway attitude is great in the courtroom. As governor, it's going to come back to bite him in the ass. As governor, McKean is absolutely supportive of a strong executive, and he's not afraid to throw his power around. He does this by firing anyone he doesn't like or is in the opposing party to him, and then installing a new person that is his friend or fellow party member. As you can imagine, this goes over about as well as sending a Declaration of Independence to the British Parliament, Later, this would become known as the spoils system, and in some instances, McKean is actually credited with coming up with it. This absolutely pissed populace off, especially a newspaper editor by the name of William Duane. Duane uses his newspaper to attack McKean any and every chance that he gets. He goes as far as to call McKean a tyrant, and it got even nastier from there. In the end, McKean sues him for libel. Wins, sort of. However, the real story is that McKean's political enemies smelled blood in the water. They immediately moved on grounds to impeach him. The whole thing fails, but only because McKean's friends in high places managed to block the impeachment and hold it off till the following year when McKean's term is going to end. Unfortunately, a point had been made. This once stubborn hero of the revolution was now, in the eyes of many people, no more than a political bully. And that stubbornness and arrogance that once seemed crucial in a fight for independence now seemed like a weapon being used against his own people. In 1808, McKean finally calls it quits. He retires, but doesn't go quietly. When the Brits come knocking a few years later in 1812, McKean, at 80 years old, helps lead the defense of Philadelphia. He lived a long and rich life and frequently corresponded with guys like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. So why don't we know his name? Why is a dude who signed the Declaration, the Articles of Confederation, was President of Congress, Governor of 2 different states, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of another, and an honored military veteran, just forgotten? In all honesty, it really just comes down to his personality. He wasn't warm and fuzzy like Ben Franklin. He wasn't a stoic god like George Washington. He was a dick. He was abrasive and confrontational and loved a good fight. And he made a mistake of making most of his enemies towards the end of his life. They were powerful enemies that were able to tell the stories after he was gone. The history books talk about the founding fathers like after the war was over, they all stood around, held hands, and sang Kumbaya. They don't know what to do with a brawler like McKean. On top of that, he was always on the move. So much so that he may not have signed the Declaration until as late as 1781. And at that point, it was just easier to cut him out of the picture. Thomas McKean's story makes you ask a different question about our history. We love to praise the philosophers and the smooth talkers of the Revolution. But just maybe the secret ingredient was a stubborn, arrogant prick. A guy who accepted a duel at the drop of a hat, strong-armed an entire colony into voting for freedom, and then pissed off so many people he almost was erased from the story. McKean's legacy is proof that it isn't the most popular guy that'll win. It's the one that refuses to lose. That stubborn arrogance may have been his biggest flaw, but it also might have been America's secret weapon. So what do you think? Was Thomas McKean just a hot-headed obstacle, or was he the stubborn son of a bitch that America really needed? If you enjoyed this look into America's most stubborn patriot, do all the YouTube things. Like, subscribe, comment, ring the bell.